Moscow attack, USA obscene ISIS claim. I have zero information on or interest in whether a subfaction of a subsect of ISIS was commissioned by the USA, Russia, the Prince of Darkness, or anyone else to attack innocent Russian citizens. What I find obscene is the USA announcing to the world their take on the incident and otherwise reputable analysts giving the USA's comments their time and attention. It is akin to an axe-murderer's family contacting the victim's family to tell them their boy didn't do it was the dodgy character down the road. This is the same USA that didn't need to investigate 9/11. It just knew within hours who did it, and you were either with us or against us. The same USA whose rabid demagogue gave a State of the Union more reminiscent of Germany in the 1930s and 1940s than a measured, reluctant, peace-mongering conversation. But then this is the same Joe Biden whose colleagues and underlings John McCain and Victoria Nuland travelled to Ukraine to support a coup against a democratically elected pro-Russian government. A pro-Russian government in a nation historically and recently a part of Russia. Can you imagine that? It's like Canada being pro-American. How absurd. And totally unacceptable to the Americans, where the only good nation is a stripped and subservient nation. Which is why Nuland herself chose the new post-coup government as caught on tape. Which is why her choices needed to be ratified by the then VP, Joe Biden. Which is why Joe Biden's son got a sinecure on the board of Ukraine's natural resource titan, Burisma, an expert in nothing for $80,000 a month, as I recall, 10% for the big guy. Which is why Joe Biden bragged about withholding US money to threaten Ukraine if it didn't fire the prosecutor looking into corruption. Joe Biden on video using the might of the USA, the official actions of the USA, not to hunt down corruption, but to prevent corruption being investigated, and bragging about it. Western values right there. But the petty laundering of a foreign nation's assets pales by comparison to the arrogance of playing God with human lives. Funding, arming and training a regime who celebrated the burning alive of 80-plus ethnic Russians in Odessa as a great day for Ukraine. Do the research, look it up. Funding, arming and training a regime who dedicated 8 years to killing 14,000 ethnic Russians in the east of Ukraine, to the point that those regions said enough, we're out of here. And they are. They're part of Russia now. The West and Ukraine say that Ukraine is entitled to get those lands and people back. Why? To kill them some more? Or the West doesn't care about Ukraine or Ukrainians. It cares about embarrassing and hurting Russia. And 500,000 dead Ukrainians is a great investment, according to Lindsey Graham. No Americans are dying. So with Western arms, vehicles, funding and personnel being directly involved in the conflict in Ukraine, the pet project of the West to provoke war with Russia, a war they finally got, the West is now actively involved in West versus Russia war, aka World War III, aka a war between nuclear powers, aka end of the world stuff. And the West leaders don't care. They get to poke Putin, and he can't do a thing about it. Either Putin caves and quits and the West takes over Russia, the Ukraine model, or Putin keeps going, in which case it's easy. Just keep supplying Ukraine with missiles and munitions. It doesn't take much to send a few guys into Russia, a drone into Russia, a missile into Russia. Keep poking the bear, there's no risk. Send a bunch of guys, drones, missiles, some will get through, make headlines. It's just that killing men, women and children at a concert, even the dumbest, most rabid Western supporters might be able to empathise with their children dying in flames and smoke and riddled by bullets. So the USA announcing about an incident in a foreign nation thousands of miles away about which it knew nothing, in which it had zero involvement, zero information, that no, it wasn't their guys, it wasn't their patsy, that wasn't for Russia, that was for you. It was for the USA's audience, the flag wavers, the rabid, the unthinking, because yeah, Mr. Redneck, Miss Liberal, they can probably just about imagine children and women dying in flames, in smoke inhalation, just like Odessa, and some riddled by bullets. A bit like Gaza, some atrocities are just too much, even for the people who think anything their team does is for the best, regardless. So the USA's announcement had nothing to do with support for Russia, for human decency, for being anti-terror. It was all about getting ahead of the narrative, the obvious conclusion that the country at war with Russia would have something to do with carrying out an atrocity in Russia. And gee, the country that had 19 men with box cutters, some of whom survived to complain indignantly about their being named as perpetrators, take down 3 buildings with 2 planes, the country that knew instantly within hours who did it, and if you disagreed, you were against the USA, very true. They're back, knowing instantly who didn't do it, despite having no information, no involvement, no conflict of interest, no participation in the war whatsoever, no reason to be embarrassed if their guys turn out to be murderous thugs yet again. And decent, reputable analysts actually gave their conspiracy theory the time of day, which I find abhorrent. Grant Russia the right to do what the USA should have done with 9/11. Investigate, decide for itself, and ruthlessly hunt down and trash the scum that had any connection with the incident. And if that trail leads to the West, well, go for it. Fully deserved. 500,000 are dead because scum hired scum, knowing that the hirers were safe and were making a good investment. Or grant Russia the same right that the USA granted itself to know without investigation within hours who did it, who the enemy was, because gee, there's a whole war plan we have in mind and you just gave us the perfect excuse to carry it out. How lucky for the USA that it could now launch a 20-year war in the Middle East. How lucky for Russia that it can now launch a war for whoever it decides was behind this attack. The USA lives by the sword, the mercenary, and the mighty dollar. Other people die by the sword, the mercenary, the proxy, and the mighty dollar. It's time for the USA to shut up and sit back as the world decides what to do about a murderous regime that fully supports mass death in Ukraine and in Gaza. No red lines, not for its friends. Fair enough, no red lines, not for Russia, not for the rest of the world. Up until the USA is the world's pariah, a fate rapidly being brought on to itself by its own actions, the USA can mouth off and its obedient, slobbering, mind-numb patrons can wave their flags, yell their support. But the people pulling the levers of power have so debased the USA and likewise the UK that the demise of the West will not be lamented. This is not the West of Omaha Beach, of the few, the desert rats, the red berets. This is a West that has learned the joys of absolute power, absolute control of the narrative, absolute wealth, absolute freedom to pursue the darkest agenda without fear or restraint, and that the mind-numb masses are oblivious simply makes their demise, along with their leaders' demise, a pity about as lamentable as the fate of the German people in the 1940s. They were supposed to learn. They were supposed to be against that kind of abuse. They aren't, so be it. Whatever happens, it will be a happy day when people stop dignifying the malign theories of sociopathic narcissists in Western capitals with a response. Andrew Mather, AndrewMatherExplore@gmail.com.